Welcome back, everybody, to Brands Hatch then, where we are about to go racing for the first time this weekend with the Maximum Networks VW Racing Cup, incorporating the Goodyear Touring Car Trophy and TCR UK. We are very excited to bring actual wheel-to-wheel racing to these time attack and drift competition events, and I hope that those of you who perhaps don't frequent race meetings all that often are going to enjoy what you see coming up shortly. The cars were out earlier on, of course, today for their qualifying session, which has set the grid for this race, and a very entertaining qualifying session that was as well, with Bradley Kent managing to snatch his first ever podium actually in the championship. Got his first victory a few weeks ago at Castle Combe, and went and got pole position in the 15-minute qualifying session earlier on today by a pretty decent margin, actually. The real surprise, though, because Bradley Kent, we know, is quick, even though he's very inexperienced, the real surprise came from the man that will line up alongside him on that front row, Bruce Winfield, in the Cupra. The Cupra has a DSG gearbox, which basically isn't quite as smooth or as quick as the sequential gearbox that is in, for example, the Hyundais out on track, and it's also a bit heavier, and you wouldn't necessarily expect that DSG Cupra to be on the pace that it showed. And yet Bruce, at a track that he has of course raced at before in his Civic Cup racing days, he went really well in qualifying, managed to get himself onto the front row of the grid, as I've said, and he's going to be now gunning for his first podium. Will be a sort of bare minimum requirement from this race, really. If he's not on the podium, that would be disappointing, but who knows, could he even get the race victory? Well, to do that, he's going to have to clear Bradley Kent into the first corner, and then he's going to have to try and keep him behind somehow over the course of a 20-minute race, which ain't going to be easy to do. Behind those two, on the second row, we've got our championship leaders. Lewis Kent is the championship leader, arriving here at Brands Hatch from Max Hart. There are a decent amount of points between them now, actually. Some 23 points the advantage for Lewis Kent, after Max was disqualified on a technical infringement from a race at Castle Combe last time. Now that technical infringement is under appeal, so that could change later in the season, but for the time being, Max is 23 points off the lead of the championship and 5 points ahead of Bradley Kent. So one thing that definitely could happen in this race is a change for second in the championship if we see Bradley Kent finish ahead of Max Hart, for example. Then we could definitely see a change there for that position in the points. Here is the grid then, as the cars head out onto the track. This isn't their green flag lap, of course, this is their out lap to the grid. The grid will line up, though, as follows, with Bradley Kent and Bruce Winfield on row 1, Lewis Kent and Max Hart row 2, as I'd said. Then it's Jack Constable and Darren Lewis, who share the third row of the grid, with Toby Byrne and Will Butler on the fourth row, Lewis and Byrne in the two NGTC spec Mercedes A-classes. Then you've got Will Powell in another Hyundai, Dan Kirby in a sequentially gearboxed Cupra, a little bit off the pace actually, Dan. Alex Kite making his Vauxhall Astra debut, but he raced in a DSG Cupra at Castle Combe. He's 11th on the grid, whilst Dan Wiley is 12th in the only rear-wheel drive car on the grid, the 1 Series NGTC BMW. Then you get into the VW Racing Cup, where it's father and son on the front row. Jack Depper ahead of Martin Depper, son ahead of father, with Ollie Turner expected really to be Jack Depper's champion, and of course he's only 4th in the points after some non-finishes in the first couple of events. Jeff Alden will line up 4th, and then Russell Joyce. Now, at the back of the grid, we will have Chris Wallace. That's an amendment to the grid. Chris Wallace is in your programmes this weekend. Those of you who are here trackside as a VW, he's not in the VW class now, though. His VW Golf was very badly damaged at Castle Combe last time when he went off and hit a marshal's post, of all things. Everyone involved was okay, but the car was very second-hand, so he's not been able to get it fixed. Instead, he has moved into the TCR class in a Hyundai that is being run by Powermax Racing, but it's actually the Hyundai chassis that Lewis Kent has driven for the last 3 seasons in the championship, and the car, therefore, that Lewis won the championship in 2020, Lewis Kent being our reigning TCR champion. Wallace will start at the back of the grid. He was disqualified from that qualifying session because of some sort of a balance of performance ineligibility. Easy for me to say. The TCR cars are all bound by this balance of performance. That is a a global, TCR being a global brand, of course, a global form of racing, and all of the cars around the world have to adhere to this balance of performance significantly quicker than the others, and there was some sort of an issue there with Chris Wallace's car, although I've just actually had a message from Si McNally from Power Max Racing, thank you for the information, Si, saying that Wallace's car is not working at all now. It's at the back of the grid, I can see, but his VW, I see, his VW is written off, we believe, so he might be in this Hyundai for the rest of the season. He's got to work his way past the VW Racing Cup drivers before he can even think about racing against the TCT and TCR cars. So those of you who are new then to this category of racing, there are, technically speaking, 3 classes of car out there. You've got the VW Racing Cup, which are the VWs at the back of the grid, the slowest cars on the grid, and then within the Touring Car Trophy you have also TCR UK, and it's the TCR machines that make up the bulk of the field, the 3 exceptions to that being those NGTC Mercedes and the BMW of Dan Wiley at the back of the grid. They still run though with a 2-litre turbo engine, so performance-wise there's not much difference between the NGTC and TCR cars, but you will hear me refer to the 2 different types of car throughout the course of the weekend. They all score points together though, so regardless whether you're in a TCR or an NGTC car, you're still fighting for the same positions, you're still fighting for the same championship, and that's why Darren Lewis, for example, in the NGTC Mercedes is actually 5th overall in the championship after finishing on the podium at Silverstone at the season opener. Had 4 races so far this season, 2 on the international circuit at Silverstone, 2 at Castle Combe last time. 4 different winners across those first 4 races. Max Hart and Lewis Kent shared the victories at Silverstone with a win and a 2nd place apiece that weekend. Then we went to Castle Combe, where Darrell Wilson inherited a victory after an exclusion for Max Hart that I mentioned earlier on. Darrell Wilson not racing here this weekend, but his car is the green Vauxhall Astra run by Darrell Wilson's team, but he's lending it to Alex Kite this weekend. So Darrell Wilson not racing, but he did win his first ever race a few weeks ago. Bradley Kent, as I documented earlier on, snatching his first victory as well. So 4 different winners. We've had 5 different drivers on the podium over the course of the season, and it looks as though that stat might continue to grow here today. If Bruce Winfield can get a good start, he has yet to have a podium. Jack Constable, who starts 5th on the grid, has yet to have a podium as well. Jack Constable arguably should have had a podium at Castle Combe, because Constable started 2nd on the grid in that first race at Combe, got the lead into turn 1, but then lost it halfway through the race and actually went off the track, I believe, and dropped down the order. Jack Constable eventually finishing that race in 6th position, which became his best finish of the year so far. Constable in the Power Maxed Cupra, the white, yellow and black one, number 11 is Jack Constable, that starts 5th on the grid. That grid has been cleared of people now, which means the green flag lap will be getting underway very shortly, and there is the green flag waving. Bradley Kent then gets a bit of a practice start. It is difficult to start from pole position here at Brands Hatch because the track is quite steeply cambered. It falls from drivers left to right towards the pit wall, so if you're starting on the inside of the front couple of rows, you're really trying to accelerate up quite a steep hill, and also there's that gradient from side to side, so it makes it difficult to get away from pole. That could maybe hand a bit of an advantage to Winfield on the outside of that front row, but of course Winfield relatively inexperienced at starting these cars, so I guess is Bradley Kent actually, though. Bradley and Bruce both in their first season of TCR competition. They both have one make front wheel drive tin top experience, though. Bradley Kent came through the Ford Fiesta school of racing in the Ford Fiesta Junior Championship, in fact, to start off his racing career. Bruce Winfield came through the Civic Cup, which is racing of course with us this weekend. The Civic Cup will have a race at 4 o'clock later on today, so there is a real transition there between the Civics and the TCR and TCT competitions, and Bruce Winfield really proving that you can make that transition pretty successfully. Bruce is the reigning Civic Cup champion and will, as I said, be gunning now for his first ever TCR podium. As far as those to watch further down the order that should move forward, hopefully, Dan Kirby's definitely one of them. Dan Kirby will line up in the number 4 Cupra, the blue and white one, from 10th on the grid. Dan had a really strong Silverstone where he had a third place in race 2 and a 4th in race 1, so some solid points. He was right up there in the championship actually after Silverstone, but then had a lot of bad luck at Castle Combe. There's been drama already for Ollie Turner in the VW Racing Cup, who's gone off on the green flag lap somehow on the entry, that is, to Surtees. That's a really odd place to go off. I can only assume the tyres a bit too, weaving around to warm the tyres up a bit too aggressively and lost the rear of the car on cold tyres. So that is not an ideal start to Ollie Turner's race, and he'll now probably have to line up at the back of the grid because he's let the entire VW Cup field through, so I don't think you're allowed to reclaim your grid position if you do that. Anyway, he is now in position. We are ready to go racing. Round number 5 of the Goodyear, the Maximum Networks VW Racing Cup, incorporating the Goodyear Touring Car Trophy and TCR UK. Red lights go on, they go out. Now away we go off the front row of the grid. It is a decent start made by Bruce Winfield. Bruce Winfield is going to challenge for the lead. He's going to do it. The Cupra gets to the front of the field. Bradley Kent down to second. Lewis Kent and Max Hart, the championship rivals, are side by side for third, with Lewis getting ahead and Jack Constable slipping into Kirby is on his toes there in the blue Cupra as well. But Bruce Winfield has the advantage as we head through Druids for the first time of asking and drop back downhill towards the left-hander at Graham Hill. Ben Bradley Kent already fishing around behind the race leader, trying to find a way through. Lewis Kent runs him on to his third position, all out of Graham Hill, then down the Cooper straight into the left-hander at Surtees. Bradley Kent really wanting to get on with this now because he can see his teammate and brother Lewis Kent closing in behind him. Jack Constable there in a dice with Darren Lewis, and on the inside goes Dan Kirby. That was a brilliant move by the number 4 car, and Dan Kirby leans a little bit on the Mercedes to try and finish the job, coming out through Clearways and Clark Curve. They will run side by side across the start, finish the books. Winfield leads the way, Bradley Kent second, Lewis Kent is third, Max Hart looking on the inside of him though, into Paddock Hill Bend, side by side between Lewis Kent and Max Hart, the 2 championship rivals who do not get on very well at all. There's quite a bit of need. They're off! Max Hart is off at Druids, and I think he might have taken Lewis Kent with him. No, Lewis is still there. The leaders are side by side, but behind there has been major drama for one of our built there. He is off at Druids Corner, and somehow Lewis Kent survived all of that in third place. His brother takes the lead though. Bradley Kent goes ahead. Bruce Winfield in second place, then third place for Lewis Kent. And where has that was payback for the similar move that Kirby made on him a lap ago. Looking out of the window then, where is Max Hart? He's in the barriers at Druids. The safety car is surely going to have to be scrambled, and it looks as though it will, but that is an absolute disaster for Max Hart, who is in the barriers. There he is. That's a pretty significant impact into the barriers as well, and unfortunately the young Irishman is out of the race. Now, we saw the very start of that when he went up the inside of Lewis into Paddock Hill Bend, and then something happened, I think, as they went up the hill towards Druids, and I don't know whether it was contact between Lewis on the inside and ended up off into the gravel trap on the outside. Similarly, Chris Wallace is off. I think that's Clearways, is it? Yeah, through Clearways, the TCR rookie Chris Wallace, making his debut start in the championship, is off and out of the race as well. Well, that was quite dramatic, wasn't it then? What a chaotic triple header for the Touring Car Trophy and TCR UK and VW Racing Cup this weekend. 1 race today, 2 races tomorrow, and Max Hart then in the Maximum Motorsport Prepared Hyundai out of the race. So too the PowerMax Racing Hyundai of Chris Wallace. The order then, Bradley Kent third is Toby Byrne. What's Toby Byrne's best result this season so far? He's not had a great season. No, he had 2 8th places at Silverstone and a 7th at Castle Combe. So Toby Byrne in that Mercedes has stormed through the field as well, because Toby only started 7th and he's picked his way into 3rd place by the end of the 2nd lap. The 3rd lap now being completed behind the safety car. Lewis Kent then down to 4th, so Kent was delayed in all of that, and I want his car in 4th place just to see if there is any damage done to that car, because he was side by side with Max Hart at the point that all started to kick off, and as they went around the rest of the lap, Lewis did seem to lose quite a bit of time. Certainly lost 3rd place to Toby Byrne. Kent then, Lewis Kent 4th, Jack Constable 5th, Darren Lewis 6th ahead of Dan Kirby. Of course, we saw that happen just before the safety car came out. Will Powell is 8th, but more importantly, Will Powell is still in the race. That's the case that often this season for Will Powell. He's had endless examples of bad luck, getting involved in accidents, mechanical problems. He hasn't actually lasted more than a lap in a race yet this year, and he's 8th place at the moment. Will Butler is 9th, and Alex Kite rounds out the top 10. Now, in the VW Racing Cup, haven't really had much time to talk about this with everything going on at the front of the field, but Jack Depper has held on to the lead from his father Martin in 2nd. Jeff Olden is 3rd, and Ollie Turner is in the pit lane. Now, that's a story. Ollie Turner then in the yellow and blue Golf has headed for the pit lane. Now, we saw him have that spin on the green flag lap. I wonder whether there was contact with the barrier when he did that, and it did some damage, because Ollie pitted at the end of lap 1 and hasn't returned to the track since. So it's going to be another non-finish. Every race that Turner has finished this year, he has won, but he's only finished 2 races out of the, well, now 5 that he started. So with that sort of inconsistency, building a championship fight here against Jack Depper is not going to be that easy to do. So the safety car is deployed then here at Brands Hatch. That is one of the reasons why Max Hart 2nd in the championship, and it means now that we are highly likely to see this change for 2nd in the points, aren't we? Because Bradley Kent, who leads the race, came into this one just 5 points behind Max Hart, and actually Bruce Winfield, 4th in the championship, was only 12 points behind Max, who scored 25 points for a win, 22 for 2nd, 20 for 3rd, and then down in 2-point increments all the way to 16th place. So yeah, there's points on offer basically as long as you finish the race, but Max Hart ain't going to finish, and that means he's going to drop, well, 25 points at the moment to Bradley Kent and 22 to Bruce Winfield. It was a good start for Bruce, wasn't it, though, in that Cupra, 2nd place, number 37. Bruce Winfield got a really good start, minimal wheel spin, got round the outside of Bradley Kent into paddock, but then cold tyres. It's really, really hard to handle these things on cold tyres, and I think maybe Bradley was just a bit more committed in the early laps. He looked quicker than Bruce. I spoke to Bradley after qualifying, actually, and he said, look, even if I lose the lead into turn 1, I'm pretty confident that I have the pace to fight back, and he proved that there, got into the lead just in the nick of time as well, just before the safety car came out. So Bradley got the advantage, of course, hasn't been able to build on that advantage yet, but there is still time in the race, 13.5 minutes to go. Chris Wallace's car, I think, is out of the gravel up at Clearways. Max Hart's car is in the process of being extricated from the tyre wall before they start digging it out of the gravel, so that one might take just a little bit longer to remove. And there is Alex Kite, the green Astra, but the green Scirocco behind him is Jack Depper, leading in the VWs, with his father Martin behind. I asked them both between qualifying and race 1 whether there were any team orders, or family orders as it should be, between them, and they both said no, but I think they both had slightly different definitions of exactly how that was all going to pan out. Jack certainly didn't seem to think there were any team orders. Martin maybe was alluding to the fact that Jack, as it's Father's Day tomorrow, should maybe let him win one of the races this weekend. I don't think that's going to happen. Certainly he's not going to let him win, but Martin is quick enough to go out there and take a victory from Jack, that's for sure. Martin formerly raced in the British Touring Car Championship, of course, Mini Challenge, and has had success in the VW Cup in the past as well. So he's a very, very handy racer, is Martin, and in his own words, he's not too old to be quick yet. So he says he's got another few years left in him. So Martin Depper, keen to show these young uns how it's done. I did spot, by the way, in the background there, as we were watching Max Hart's recovery, the yellow and blue Golf. You can just see it at the back of the shot, actually. That is Ollie Turner. So Turner's back on track now. There are only going to be a maximum of 4 finishers in the VW Racing Cup, so it pays to get out there and finish, even if you're a few laps down. There's no chance really that Ollie's going to race his way into the podium places, but if someone drops off in front of him, even if they don't, he'll score 4th place points, so worth staying out there and trying to score at least some championship points. But in the VW Racing Cup championship, Jack Depper had a 15-point advantage over Russell Joyce, and Russell Joyce is not out there because Russell had some mechanical issues in qualifying and hasn't been able to get the Power Max Racing Golf on track. So actually Jack Depper's real rival now is Jeff Olden, who comes into this weekend 19 points behind him. Olden is 3rd in the race though at the moment, and the added complication of the fact they've got Dan Wiley's rear-wheel drive TCT BMW between them, so before Olden can start challenging the Deppers, he's got to clear that, in theory, faster BMW. There's Ollie Turner heading through Paddock Hill Bend then, and working the tyres quite hard now. Is there damage to the right-hand side of the car? Couldn't quite see from here, but it's possible that he rattled the barriers when he had the spin on the warm-up lap. Seems to be some difficulty here, doesn't there, in attaching Max Hart's car to the recovery vehicle, so I think that's the reason for this slight delay. We're nearly halfway through the race now, so excellent news for Bradley Kent, because it's less laps that he has to worry about fending the field off, but I think people like Bruce Winfield and Toby Byrne would be quite liking this race to get started again, because now they've had a chance to get temperature into the tyres in a slightly more controlled manner behind the safety car. Winfield might be able to challenge Bradley. Certainly setting up to be an intriguing battle between the second, third and fourth place cars. Lewis Kent there in fourth. Constable comes through in fifth, and the red flag is now out, so they've red flagged the race. This recovery is obviously going to take a little bit longer than we hoped, so red flag out. There will be a restart, therefore, to this race at some point. Obviously, once they've got the Hyundai out of the gravel at Druids. And we've completed more than 3 laps as well, so it won't go back to the original grid. They'll restart in the order they're in now. So Bradley Kent and Bruce Winfield on the front row in that order, with Toby Byrne third. That was a demon first lap for Toby Byrne. And with another standing start now, he might just be able to move his way even further up the order. Those Mercedes are pretty good off the line after all. So unfortunately, red flag comes out then here at Brands Hatch in our opening race of the weekend for the VW Racing Cup, the Goodyear Touring Car Trophy and TCR UK. We are confident we will get a restarted race before too much longer. Remember that we've got just the one race for these drivers today, but they have 2 tomorrow, one at 11:45, one at 2:20. So it is the only triple header this season, actually, in this championship. All of the other events, just 2 races in the one day to try and bring costs down, but Brands Hatch weekend was always going to be sort of the jewel in the crown of the season, really. And now the cars have been brought down the pit lane, but are now heading back out of the pit lane just as quickly as they came in. So I think maybe there was a miscommunication there. I think they were supposed to go onto the grid to be re-gridded, but they will do that now at the end of this lap, you would imagine. So around they go then, and they'll line up in the grid markings, and we'll await further news as to how long this restart is going to be. The timing screens have gone to 0 now, but we know there will be a restart of some sort. The issue is something to do. I think the front bodywork on the Hyundai has been damaged, so they're not able to get the tow rope hooked on properly. They're having to now take off the front bodywork with Max Hart's guidance, because he knows the car quite a bit better than the marshals do, and Max will assist them in getting the bodywork off. Then they can hook the tow rope on, and then from that point it shouldn't be a long operation. It's just that was taking a bit longer than it should have done, and rather than continue eating into the race distance and leave us with maybe only 4 or 5 minutes of racing at the end, the sensible decision was taken to red flag the race and at least give us a bit more racing once it restarts. So the field then works its way up through the top end of the circuit, and of course if we get a restart, one of the people this will benefit is Ollie Turner, because if you are laps down in the race, it's my understanding that when the race restarts, you will not be those laps down anymore. So Ollie Turner, having pitted at the end of the first lap, was 2 laps down. That will now get eradicated, and Ollie will now have the potential to fight for a podium, which is good news for Ollie in the championship, because he arrived here 4th in the VWs, 24 points off the top, behind Jack Depper. Certainly the Depper Scirocco seemed to have the pace this weekend, but you never know, Ollie might be able to get up there and challenge them. Certainly this was his only chance to do that. He was guaranteed to finish 2 laps down if the race had just continued as it was. So they're lining the field up then on the left-hand side of the road, and eventually they'll start moving them into their correct grid positions once we know how long the delay is going to be. But there you go, you can see the car is now almost out of the gravel. Once they got the tow rope attached, it was a fairly easy process. Now the next question is, how badly damaged is this car? because they need to get it back out there for the 2 races tomorrow. The good news is that although I said it was in the tyres, it wasn't really. It's got these Recticel barriers in front of the tyres at most corners on the track. So if you go off and you make the wall, you're not hitting the solid or relatively solid tyres. You hit those foam barriers. They absorb the impact incredibly well. You can have a pretty sizable shunt into those Recticel barriers, and the car bounces off them as if nothing happened. The only reason that didn't happen for Max Hart is he got buried in the gravel as well, but Max's car looks actually drivable. In fact, it is drivable because Max is going to drive it back to the pits, so he's going to traipse a load of gravel down the hill coming out of Druids as well, but the wheels all seem to be pointing in vaguely the right direction. The front bodywork is missing, but that's because it was taken off by the marshals to help the recovery effort, so you can see what the front of a touring car looks like now. Very bare indeed. The metal bar, though, across the grille there, across the radiator, is there for a reason, because there is the occasional bit of contact in touring car racing. I don't know whether you've heard, and so that metal bar is there to protect the radiator and the inlet pipes there in front, try and stop the inner workings of the car getting too badly damaged if you have a bit of front to rear contact. Some sort of side-to-side contact, I think, though, that sent Max off the road in the first place there at high speed going into Druids, and that will certainly not do his championship hopes any good whatsoever. Arrived here nearly a full race win's worth of points away from the championship lead as it was, and he's now going to lose even more. The only good news for him, I guess, at the moment is that Lewis Kent, who is the points leader, is only 4th. Lewis has been not quite on the same pace as his brother this weekend, it must be said. Bradley's possibly had an edge. He was quicker than him in practice, out-qualified him as well. He's leading the race now, and this home circuit for the Kents is a circuit that Lewis has done thousands of laps around, and Max perhaps slightly fewer, but he's Bradley, I should say, slightly fewer, but he's clearly figured it out pretty well, because he is the pace setter so far this weekend. So Max Hart back in the pit lane then, and he will shortly head back to the outer paddock. His race is done, but the rest of the cars lining up on the grid. The restart, by the way, will be over 8 minutes, and it will have 1 green flag lap to precede it. Obviously, we go through the start procedure again, so the cars will head around on their green flag lap before 8 minutes of racing. So just less than half the race will remain. Obviously, we would love to give them a full restart of, what, 10 or 12 minutes, however long was left on the clock, but there are other things going on throughout the day, more races and sessions out on track, so it's important that we try and keep the timetable moving, so that's why we have this shortened race. Also, of course, the cars are only fueled for so many laps, and with a restart, you have another lap back around to the grid, and the fields, the cars are obviously fueled to only just have enough of the enough fuel to get to the end of the race, so they can't just run them indefinitely. Again, hence the reason for the slightly shortened restart, but that looks as though it's not that far away now. Cars are lined up on the grid. The track, as far as we know, is clear, and we will get the green flag procedure underway very shortly. That Mercedes is going to be one to watch, isn't it? Toby Byrne then, from 7th on the grid to 3rd in the first 2 laps. He now starts 3rd, of course, for the restart. Now, that does mean he's on the inside of row 2, which, as I said earlier on, is a slightly tricky place to get off the line. If you're anywhere inside the first 2 or 3 rows, you don't really want to be on the inside. Gives you the better line into Paddock Hill Bend, but it's just harder to accelerate off the line. And there's Max Hart in the pit lane, and he'll watch on now with quite a bit of frustration, you'd imagine, as the restart procedure begins. The cars head out on their green flag lap then of the Brands Hatch Indy Circuit, this 5th round of the championship. It's already provided us with plenty of drama. Let's see what the situation is now over the remaining 8 minutes. Quite a lot of storylines here to keep your eye on, with Lewis Kent a little bit behind the 8 ball now, down in 4th position. Dan Kirby was coming forward, wasn't he, as well? Dan Kirby, where did he start the race, Dan? He was only 10th on the grid, wasn't he? And he's now, what, 7th? So a good start there for Dan Kirby. telling me that maybe he had a few issues in qualifying, because he's certainly got better pace now than he had in the 15-minute qualifying session this morning. But some drivers are just better racers than qualifiers as well, of course. Some drivers don't really enjoy or aren't as good at getting the maximum out of the car over a single lap, and yet give them a 15 or 20-minute race and they'll make some good overtakes and move through the field. Good to see Will Powell still running as well. As I said earlier on, all these problems he's had, he said, look, if the car starts at the start of the race, I'll be pretty happy with that. It did that, and it's about to head into the restarts, of course, from towards the back of the top 10, admittedly, but he's had just so little racing time. He's had a bit of testing now, and the practice sessions this weekend have gone fairly trouble-free, but of course all of yesterday's testing was in the wet, so he hasn't really learnt a lot from that. So Will Powell learning on the go now in the races. Lines up fourth car on the outside line there, 8th on the grid for Will Powell. Right, let's try this again then, shall we? The 5th round of the championship, over 8 minutes, the restart, and it is the same front row as we had before. Bradley Kent, look at the way he's angled his car steeply to the left to try and counter that that gravitational pull towards the pit wall that you get on this cambered start-finish line. Bruce Winfield looking for another good start though from the outside. He got one before. Let's see what happens then. Take 2, 8 minutes of racing, the red lights go out. It's an even worse start this time for Bradley Kent. Winfield's going to get the lead, and Toby Byrne goes up the inside for 2nd place as well. That was an absolute disaster, and here comes Jack Constable up the inside as well. Bradley Kent could be down to 4th by the time they get through turn 1. He will be. Constable's going to try and close the door. Bradley Kent's almost in the gravel as he tries to fight back around the outside. His brother Lewis had a bad start as well. He's been swamped by Constable and Kirby as they make their way through the first few corners. It's Winfield that leads. It's Byrne 2nd. Bradley Kent leaning on Jack Constable. 2 wheels on the grass for Kent, and up the inside goes Kirby as well. Some more really opportunistic overtaking there from Dan Kirby. That was his signature over the first few laps, and he picks the pocket there of Jack Constable for 4th going through Graham Hill Bend. That delays Constable, and so Darren Lewis goes through as well. So Constable slipping backwards. Lewis Kent is really struggling. I think he must have some damage after that contact earlier on, and that was the race leader, wasn't it? Bruce Winfield running wide from the lead of the race at Clearways, and so Toby Byrne leads for the first time in his Touring Car Trophy career. He's got Bradley Kent breathing down his neck though. Into Paddock Hill Bend they go. Byrne on the inside, Kent on the outside. For 3rd it's close as well, but Bradley Kent goes around the outside and there's contact. Bradley Kent is off, Toby Byrne is sideways. Dan Kirby gets the lead of the race. Dan Kirby gets ahead of Toby Byrne, and Bradley Kent in the gravel, of course. Now Byrne leans on his teammate Darren Lewis. What is going on today at Brands Hatch? This is astonishing racing. Dan Kirby from 10th on the grid leads the way now from Toby Byrne 2nd, Constable 3rd, Darren Lewis is there in 4th as they head down the back straight with Bruce Winfield still in 5th. Now, where is Brad? That's the question. Bradley must, yes, he's still in the gravel at Paddock, so Bradley Kent is going no further. Lewis Kent, his brother, now really needs to try and maximise these points, because as much as they are family, they are fighting each other for the championship here, and Lewis needs to try and do better than, well, where is he now? Let's see. They're going to come across the start-finish line at the end of the 2nd lap, and it will be about 8th or 9th, isn't it? Darren Lewis on the inside of Constable takes 3rd place away from the Power Max Cupra, which fights back again. Now, surely there were yellow flags. Yes, there were. So that was not a legal pass for Darren Lewis. He's going to have to give the place back anyway, and he might still get in trouble for overtaking under the yellow flags. That is one of the biggest no-nos in racing. Lewis Kent, to answer my previous question, is 8th after the restart, so definitely that car is not handling right after whatever happened between himself and Max Hart earlier on, although he gets a run on Will Powell there and tries to get up the inside of him going into Surtees. Right, got to remember to breathe in this race, haven't you? We've got 5.5 minutes still to go. Into Clearways they go then for the 3rd time. The lead being held by Dan Kirby. He's getting away as well from Toby Byrne in 2nd. Constable is still 3rd, yes, number 11. And then this is the fight for 4th, with Darren Lewis 4th, Bruce Winfield 5th, and Will Butler out of nowhere into 6th place as well, ahead of Will Powell. So that's been a change since the restart. Then it's Lewis Kent ahead of Powell, Kite and Wiley, with Jack Depper still leading in the VW Racing Cup. Lewis Kent barges aside Will Butler as they go through Druids. That is a fairly physical move, but a fired up Lewis Kent here knows that he has to make progress. Max Hart is out of the race, Bradley Kent is out of the race. If Lewis doesn't score points in this race, he could live to regret it as we go deeper into the season. So he needs to move forward in a car that clearly seems to be a little bit wounded. There goes Alex Kite, there's Dan Wiley. Now what's going on in the VWs? It's still Depper 1 and 2, Jack Depper ahead of Martin Depper. Third place is Jeff Alden, there he goes in the Golf, and then it's still Ollie Turner some way adrift in fourth. So I think although Turner's back out on track, all might not be well in the number 22 car. Through paddock they go then, fastest lap by Darren Lewis. So Lewis is fourth, he's only 3/10 behind Constable now though, and might still have time to get himself into the fight for the victory here. If Darren Lewis can clear Constable legally this time, then he does have the pace, I think, to go after the top two. Runs a bit wide though through Druids, does the third place man. There are the top two, Kirby to Byrne. Byrne was quicker by a couple of tenths on the previous lap. The gap down to 0.8 of a second between them. Then Kirby leads, Byrne second, Constable third, Lewis fourth. Fifth place there goes Bruce Winfield. And Lewis Kent, in fairness, has caught that group pretty quickly. So Lewis Kent, the white and orange Hyundai at the back of the group, the championship leader, is now looking possibly like he might be able to gain a few more places here. You can see the way that he's gapped Will Butler and Will Powell, and indeed Alex Kite there in the green Astra behind them. Come across the start-finish line once again. 3.5 minutes to go. Lewis Kent, fastest lap of the race, so he's bedded himself in now, and he goes up the inside of Will Butler, Bruce Winfield, I beg your pardon, and takes away 5th position. So Lewis Kent is now starting to march towards the front. It's going to be too late for him surely to challenge for the race victory, but a podium could still be possible. Also, look how close the leaders are now. Dan Kirby, there they are, look. They are absolutely together. Kirby's been caught again by Toby Byrne on the previous lap to the tune of 0.4 of a second. So Kirby feeling the heat at the head of the field. Then you've got this four-way battle for third developing. It is a job to know where to look in this race, but both of these drivers are looking for their first ever victory in the championship. And off goes Darren Lewis. Darren Lewis off into the gravel trap at Clearways. That looks suspiciously like he was given a helping hand into that gravel trap, you'd have to say. We'll focus on that in a moment though, because the lead battle heads towards Paddock Hill Bend with 2 3/4 minutes to go. And Toby Byrne is right on the boot lid now. Dan Kirby, who made a bit of a mistake at Clearways half a lap ago, he needs to try and limit those mistakes because he's got this Mercedes breathing down his neck now. Jack Constable is still third with Lewis Kent half a second behind him, having set another fastest lap on the previous lap. Kirby wide at Druids, Byrne to the outside, goes back to the inside at Graham Hill. That's not a passing place. Toby doesn't need to rush this here. He's under no immediate threat from the cars behind. The last thing he wants to do here is get involved in contact with Dan Kirby. That takes them both out of the race. Through Surtees they go. Red flag is out again. Red flag is out again, and that will, I think, be the end of the race now with Darren Lewis's car in the gravel up at Clearways, and of course you've got Bradley Kent's car off at Paddock as well. Then I think that is going to be the end of what has been, I'd say, the most dramatic TCT race that I've ever seen. Not necessarily for all the best reasons, but one of the real feel-good stories that will come out of this is a debut victory for Dan Kirby and a debut podium for Toby Byrne and Jack Constable, I think I'm right in saying. Jack, yeah, hasn't had a podium yet, so all three of the drivers in the top three, well, two of them, it's their first ever podium, and Kirby, it's his first ever victory. And Lewis Kent will be particularly disappointed about this red flag because he only recovered to fourth. You'd feel that he was almost certain to get third place before the end of the race. So he will score just the 18 points for that. He'll still extend his championship lead, of course, though, because the next two drivers to him in the championship, Max Hart and Bradley Kent, both non-finished. So the clock for now has frozen at 2 minutes and 10 seconds left. I doubt we will get a restart, but we'll wait for official news on this, of course, and watch to see where the cars are guided at the end of this in-lap. Coming out of Clearways now is Dan Kirby then. Is this to take the race victory, or is it going to be another race restart? Well, the time's ticked down to 0, but there's no checkered flag yet on the timing screens, which normally is TSL Timing's way of telling us that the race won't be restarted. So, well, news as and when we get it. Yeah, so the graphic on screen is showing a checkered flag, and the cars are heading for Parc Ferme, so although my timing screen wasn't saying it, I think that was the end of the race. So it is Dan Kirby who gets the victory, Toby Byrne second, and Jack Constable third. In the VWs, Jack Depper takes the victory for Martin Depper second, and Jeff Alden in third position. Right, I'm going to head downstairs to get some interviews. Alexi, I believe, is going to take over and fill for a couple of minutes whilst I run downstairs and have a chat with a very excited race winner, Dan Kirby.
What an absolutely incredible race. Thanks a lot for covering that, Andy. We'll look forward to your interviews downstairs. that that was really something. And I think for a newcomer to TCR, TCT like myself, and perhaps others watching this stream or watching live at the track, that really was something. And I think this is, you know, this kind of drama, the contact, the red flags, the rivalries, that's really something that that's really like an iconic touring car thing, right? Just these intense battles, the wheel banging, all of that good stuff. Of course, perhaps more serious incidents than we would have liked. This was quite a disrupted session. We did see a lot of casualties here. Of course, no less than our initial podium sitter. So, yeah, perhaps not quite the outcome he would have wanted, but also, just generally a very interesting race. It'd be very interesting to see what our debut winner and debut podium finishers would be thinking of today's result. Bradley Kent, of course, probably fuming at his finishing result, considering he did start out in pole. And it'll be likewise interesting to hear from Dan Kirby, and of course, and Toby Byrne, who previously, you know, has not been finishing up this high, and yet for the first time in his TCT and TCR career manages to get a second place. So first podium there, also for Toby Byrne. Bruce Winfield as well. I mean, what a race for Bruce Winfield. Actually, it looks like in the pit lane we may have something happening. There we go. I can see Andy on the screen. He is ready to pounce into action. Andy, what have you got for us?
I thought I was. What a race. I don't really know what to say after that one. So much drama, so much incident, but one driver managed to avoid it all somehow, and we're going to find out how. Dan Kirby, you came from 10th on the grid to win your first ever race in the championship. I mean, is that just a bit of a blur to you?
It was just a mad race, and it's just everything's gone wrong this weekend, and you know, to come through the pack like that, you know, a bit of fortune as well. Obviously it helps, of course it does, but you know, to get my first win is unbelievable. But like you say, it's absolute chaos race. There's incidents all over the place, but like anything in touring car racing, you just got to keep your nose clean. We had a little bit of an issue. I had a bit of contact with Jack, my teammate, so you know, I'm driving like, you know, 10-degree angle for the race as well, which didn't help, but fortunately managed to bring it home, and obviously the red flag at the end's probably helped me as well.
Yeah, you were starting to feel the heat there from Toby, weren't you? But you'd made some brilliant moves up to that point, some really cheeky dives up at clearways. You're clearly confident on the brakes in this car. Yeah,
brakes are great on these, and you know, especially after the first restart, I knew, you know, Martin Broadhurst come over on the radio, said you've got 6-7 minutes, and I knew you've just got to get away, you know, and you've got to make the moves nice and early and get them done, and that's what I did. And then there was a bit of incident in front, and you know, all of a sudden, you know, get yourself in the mix, you know, and people start tripping up in front of you, got half a chance, and here we are.
So you've got one win now, 2 more races this weekend. You're clearly going strong. You should have a better grid position as well now. What do you think? More wins on the way?
I hope so. I'm not quite sure how the grid thing worked. I think it was all based on qualifying. I think I might be wrong. You might correct me, but so I think I might have it all to do again in races 2 and 3 tomorrow. But yeah, listen, start of the race, I'd have taken a win. I would have taken a podium or anything, probably a few spaces behind. So yeah, really good. A great start to the weekend.
Certainly entertaining to watch. Huge congratulations, Dan Kirby, on his first ever race victory. Now, the Deppers are down here. Let's see if we can have a word with our VW Racing Cup winner, Jack Depper, who is chatting away with a smiley Max Hart. That surprised me. I'll have a word with you in a second, I think. Right, Jack. Your race was quite calm compared to what was going on in the TCT ranks. You had your dad pretty close behind, but no real pressure.
Well, I mean, it wasn't much of a race. I mean, how many laps? We spent more laps behind the safety car than we did actually racing, I think. But I mean, can't complain coming home with a win. Points in the bag. Obviously, I had a nice little tussle with Dad. But yeah, I mean, from the VW perspective, quite relaxed.
You taught him everything you know, eh?
Yes, I did a little bit. Yeah, he was pulling away in some places, and then I think you started to get a little bit ruffled, didn't you? Because I then reeled you back in.
Is that right? Were you ruffled?
I wouldn't say ruffled. I think I took my foot off the gas a little bit because I thought I'd give the old man a chance and, you know, just make his day a little bit. So.
Yes, but on the first start though, I did get in front of you, didn't I?
You did, but then you had a bit of traffic in front of you, so.
No, actually, I missed third gear.
Ah.
I could sit and listen to this all day. Congratulations, Jack, and Martin as well on his return, getting second place. Max Hart's done a runner. I don't really blame him, to be honest. So let's head back up to the box to Alexei.